Welcome everybody to this evening's masterclass, which is how and why to set up a theatre company. We've got five wonderful panelists. We have Sam, Alix, John, and Kyla and Sue that are going to be talking to you today about their own experience setting up a company, and also just themselves and their practices in general. We're going to run the session in 3 parts. So we're going to start with a brief introduction from each person, and then they're going to have a chance to sort of Dragon's Den style, give you 10 minutes of their time about why and how they set up a company, or they've been part of setting up a company. And then we're going to finish off with a discussion, which will hopefully be led by your questions. That's the plan. So do keep dropping them into the chat or the Q&A as we run through the whole thing, and I'll keep a note of them and I'll lead the discussion. So without further ado, first of all, I'd like to introduce Alix. I'm going to let her hand over and talk a little bit about herself.
Awesome, thank you, Susie. Hi, everybody. My name is Alix Harris, Alix with an I. Always like to start off with that intro. So I am where to begin? So I'm artistic director of Beyond Face Theatre Company, and we're based in Plymouth. I'm also a freelance director. 2 days a week, I lecture at Exeter University in the drama department. I'm an associate lecturer for Falmouth University, and I'm on the board for Doorstep Arts in Torbay and also Indra Congress. So Indra is like an international arts program that I've been part of for the last 10 years. I was born in Plymouth and grew up in Cornwall, and returned back to Plymouth for university and got involved with the Barbican Theatre in my first year, and many years later, even though I left about 12, I left the Barbican to take Beyond Face in its next direction. In the last couple of years, I've worked with Headlong as an Origins director, looking at mid-scale directing, and have also been part of an artistic director leadership programme, which is a national programme for leaders of colour. I'm just going to leave it there, because then obviously you'll hear more from me.
Thank you very much. And Alix, if you want to drop any links onto websites or Beyond Face into the chat, any point, people can have a little look at that after the session. I'm going to pass over to John now.
Fab. Hello, everybody. I'm John. I'm here today as joint artistic director with Sam of Downstage Right. In my on my own, I work as a freelance playwright and theatre director, which I do on a freelance basis. I also make some other work with another company, Untamed Theatre, who specialises particularly in outdoor or site-specific work, or new writing in unusual spaces. And I also am a lecturer at Plymouth University, at Plymouth Conservatoire. And my work mostly is focused on new writing and the development of new plays, whether that's developing my own work or working with other writers and artists on developing work for the stage, which I also do for Theatre Royal Plymouth as their literary associate, managing their work with writers and running writer development programs there. And I also script read for a number of local and national programs, including the Nick Dark Award, run out of Falmouth, and other things like that. So yeah, playwriting is at the heart of nearly everything that I do in those terms.
Thank you very much. Kyla, over to you.
Hello everyone, my name is Kyla Goodey, and I am a freelance director, writer, actor, part-time choreographer, and I work with various companies in the UK, but predominantly in Cornwall. I'm lucky enough to have worked with Sue Hill, who's here tonight, and the WildWorks family, and I've worked with Knee High, touring their last show, Ubu Karaoke, and Miracle, and various other UK companies. I also run 1/3 of Trifle Gathering Productions, who I'm going to talk to you about tonight. And I run that with the mighty Sally Crooks and majestic Hannah Stevens. And we are based in Cornwall. We do sort of comedy events. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. And I also am a member of Kapow, which is a women's network. I think it was spoke about at the last event from lovely Aga and Emily. I love Kapow. Pff, look at that, beautiful. Well done, Jem. Yeah, and that is making women's work more invisible and basically connecting and uniting in many different ways. So that's me, thanks.
Thanks very much, Kyla. And next I'm going to pass over to Sam.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Sam. I am the other half of Downstage Right here with John tonight. Outside of Downstage Right, I guess I'm a playwright and facilitator first and foremost. So as a writer and a theatre maker, I've been doing bits and bobs with the Theatre Royal and Doorstep Arts in Torbay. And then as a facilitator, I work on a range of groups. Outside of that, I do some work for Doorstep as their emerging creative producer, and I'm a centre stage creative for the National Youth Theatre. So they're a charity which sort of work across the UK, but the work I've been doing with them has sort of been geared around getting some more of their work to take place down in this part of the country. I'm originally from Torbay. I sort of moved away from the region to train in London, and then I came back to Torbay and came down to Plymouth as part of the Emerging Artist Scheme with the Theatre Royal, and now I live here. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Sam. And Sue.
Hi, I'm Sue. I'm a Cornish girl, grew up here, left like most Cornish kids, left when I was 18 and lived everywhere else for 20 years, and then came back in 1988 and joined Knee High. I'm a theatre maker and a visual artist, curator, storyteller, workshop leader, bit of a tart really. I am going to talk a bit tonight about the kind of growth of WildWorks growing out of Knee High, and I'll move into the great outdoors. So I'll talk a bit more about that later on. I work for the Eden Project. I work for Eden Project International at the moment. I was there at the very beginning as artistic director, curating and commissioning hundreds of artists. But now I work on international projects, and I'm working on a big project remotely in Qingdao. But I also do, I've been running lock-ins and artist retreats. Hi, Alix. And so I'm still involved very much with WildWorks and working as a performer and sometimes as a designer and a workshop leader with them.
Amazing, brilliant. And you are all such efficient panelists that we are ahead of time at the moment, which is just unheard of in these masterclasses. So that's fantastic. Thank you for being so quick off the mark with your introductions. We're going to move now into allowing each of our company representatives to talk a little bit more about their theatre group and how they set it up and why they did it. In the meantime, please keep commenting on the comment box. It's lovely to see Jem's comments flowing through. And if you have any questions or curiosities or anything at all related to what pops up, drop them into the Q&A as they're talking, and I'll make sure that they get featured or they answer you in person. So we're going to start off with Beyond Face, if that's okay, Alix, and give you a chance to talk a bit more about that. Meanwhile, we're all going to drop off this, so we're going to turn off our videos, and that means that you've just got Alix's face to look at for a while, which is
lovely. Thank you. Oh, and now I can only see my face, which is hello me. Cool. Okay, thank you. Where to begin? So as I mentioned, I started working with the Barbican Theatre when I was at university as a facilitator, and also joining their youth company, and worked with the Barbican throughout that time. And then when I graduated, I started working for the Theatre Royal Plymouth. And I remember once I sat down and wrote a one-page proposal to set up a theatre company, a black theatre company, just for an opportunity to have better representation. Because when I joined university, growing up in Cornwall, I was like one of the only black people in my year. And when I went to university, I thought that I would experience like much more greater diversity. Alas, I was wrong. And so I kind of thought to myself, like, what you know, what needs to change here. So wrote a proposal for a Black theatre company, and showed it to a couple of people in the industry, and they said to me like, oh, that will never happen. So I was like, oh, okay. So I just kind of put it to the side, and then started to continue my work with different organisations, started to do a lot of international work via the Indra project, but still had it in the back of my head that I felt like there was such a significant lack of representation in Plymouth. And then there was a big project that the Barbican were leading on in 2012, and I was running a group at the Theatre Royal, and that group was for young Black young people from migrant or refugee backgrounds. And I remember saying to them, you know, are you guys going to audition for this big project? And they said no. And I said, oh, why not? And they were like, it's not for people like us. And I was like, oh, okay. And that again stayed with me, and I just started to kind of think like, what is that the experience for other people? And then there were these two really extraordinary young girls that I was working with, and they were just about to go off to university, and on separate occasions met with me and sat me down and said, Alix, something needs to happen in this city. Like, please, could you do something for other young Black people in the city? So I managed to get like a little bit of seed money from an organisation called RIO, which stands for Real Ideas Organisation. And I did some workshops across some schools and with the Race Equality Council. And I basically just did some workshops going like, do you feel like, you know, have you ever been to the theatre? If you have, like, what have you seen? Do you feel like it's for you? And most people had only seen the pantomime. And they were like, nope, never going back again, because they found that really daunting. And then the most of it with the consensus was that they just said they didn't really feel that theatre was for them. And I asked the question, I was like, if there was something that was specifically for you, would you want to join? And they said yes. So I started to do a bit of research around to see like what other theatre companies existed in the country. So there was 20 Stories High that are based in Liverpool, and they had their work come down to Plymouth quite a lot. And that was really, I love that theatre company because they put young people at the absolute heart of the organisation. And there isn't this thing about young people and professionals, like everybody that works with 20 Stories High is considered a professional. And I really liked that model. And then I also looked at Tallowa Theatre Company, which is the oldest Black-led theatre company in the country. There was also Tamasha, who at the time was much more focused around South Asian theatre work. And there are a few others. And I remember writing to Tallowa and Tamasha, and actually sent them a letter, would you believe it? I sent them an email and a letter. I'm going to gauge that some of you might be laughing at that. John, hope you are, and sent them a letter and asked if I could kind of just have coffee with them, really, just to get to know them more as an organisation and understand a bit more detail about it. One of them came back and said no, the other one said yep, and they actually came to Plymouth, took me out for lunch, and then offered me a year's placement as an associate artist with them. And that was like completely invaluable to have that support. I was then obviously in within the Barbican Theatre, and the Barbican gave me so much support in terms of spending time with the then artistic director, Mark Leville, to just kind of talk through ideas and start to write a funding application. Plymouth Culture also gave me, I met with them, I didn't know what Plymouth Culture was, didn't understand them as an organisation. Sat down, had a meeting with Dom, who was the head of it then, and he was like, I'm going to give you some money to support with your application. I'll give you your 10% that you need for your Arts Council application. So got that, and then I applied for 6 months to pilot the idea of Beyond Face. So I wasn't 100% sure that it was going to work. And where I got to then was to create a youth company, and also to perform myself and to develop a professional piece of work. And it just all kind of escalated really quickly, and just gave that pilot phase just gave me the opportunity to kind of navigate and see whether anything, whether Beyond Face was needed. And we did a summer school, and we did a youth company production, and was working with a lot of young people. And then I was able to then put in the next funding bid for 18 months worth of work. And that was when I was able to bring a producer on board. So Helen Bovey, legend, she came on board as our producer. and then the company's just grown ever since then. And I guess, you know, I think I always go back to that thing of that person particularly saying like that will never happen. And, you know, I think maybe at that time when I was 21, it might not have been the right time to happen, but I'm glad I didn't listen to that. And I think I've spent my life not listening to people, not listening to teachers who told me that I was too ambitious, people telling me that I'm just not, you know, don't do that because, you know, you won't succeed. And I think another key thing about the story with Beyond Face is that there's Eclipse Theatre, which again is another touring Black theatre company. They came to Plymouth and brought a show, Sizwe Banzi is Dead. And two significant things happened to me with that show. First one is that you went into the auditorium and it was segregated. So you had to go either if you were white or you were not white, you sat on a particular side of the auditorium. And I was working with a young person and she came to see the show and we obviously sat on the Black side. And she looked at the audience and turned to me and went, "Alix, the white people do know that I'm not going to stab them, don't they?" And that was her first experience of theatre. And I felt a huge responsibility to understand what people's first experiences of theatre was. And that's really embedded a lot of the way that I think and approach the design of the company and what we're doing. And then the other thing is Eclipse had a guy come in to do audience development, and he walked from the train station to the Theatre Royal and sat down with me and went, "Oh my God," he said, how do you live here? And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. It's all I know." And he was like, "I don't know how you live here." And I've had so many Black people that come to the city going, "I don't know how you live here." And I told him about the idea for Beyond Face, and he was like, "Okay, I get it, and you have to stay." And you know, we're like 5 years old now. That was 5 years ago. And I'm not going to lie to you all because it would be wrong to say like it's really hard work. It's hard work to run a company, but it's also hard work to run a company that is about campaigning. And I guess that's important to say that we are a campaigning theatre company. Our mission is to raise the profile and visibility of Black, Asian and ethnically diverse people. I'll put a link into the chat about language because we used to be called a BAME company. We don't do that anymore. We used to say that we're people of colour, and language is changing and is always really fluid. But there's been a lot of work done this year in response to language. So rather than me giving you a lecture about that, I'll just share the information with you. Yeah, and I think, you know, this year with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor's murders, I should say, has meant that suddenly, even though Beyond Face has been existed in the city for 4.5, 5 years, we've felt quite not seen. And this year we've suddenly become visible in a huge way. And people have come at us at a really fast pace and want us in spaces and having these conversations. So, and the reason I'm telling you that is because we don't get to just make theatre. We have that campaign, and we're doing all of that work alongside making work. And it's not possible to not do that work in a place like Plymouth or Exeter or Devon or Cornwall, because we have to do both of that work. In terms of the art, we have a youth company now, which is the 12 to 18-year-olds. We have the Beyond Ensemble, which is an artist development program, which was born out of conversations with students at universities who feel like they need a safe space to be Black and brown people, and not feel like they have to be constantly asking questions or feeling uncomfortable in spaces. And we give kind of one-to-one mentoring support and development with them. And then we make our work that tours. And then we're also doing anti-racism training with arts and culture organisations as well. And I guess just to finish off, really, like my key kind of tips for starting out with a theatre company is to recognise what makes you unique. What is it about you and what you want to do that other people aren't doing? And that can be around location, as opposed to, like, you know, you might want to start up a company that's all about jelly. I don't know why I said jelly, but there's a company that you want to make theatre about that just uses jelly, and but there might be a company in Scotland that also does that. That still makes you unique because you're a Southwest company that makes work about jelly. What a fun idea. There you go. Jelly theatre for the win. Exactly. Yeah. Buzzing, wobbly. Yeah. So I think just finding what your kind of unique selling point is, and also just researching who is out there, like who do you admire? And I went months and months just going across the internet and looking and going and seeing shows and watching people and going, what is it that why do I love this company, or why do I love this show? And just writing it down and going, okay, that's really exciting and that's excited me. Looking at websites and going, how do they tell the story of their theatre company, and how do I want to tell the story of my theatre company? And I think storytelling is really important, and partnerships and support. Just email people and knock on the doors, even if you don't necessarily know what you want to get, because I didn't know what I wanted to get from Plymouth Culture, but it ended up being like a really useful partnership that we ended up having. But just be clear with your vision and what you want to do. Like mine is a political, as I said, it's a campaign, and I'm really clear about what it is, why we exist. And then people, when they meet with me, know they can come away and go, okay, I know what that company is about. And so I think whatever it is that you want to make, know what it is that you are about, and that really communicates. I guess I'd say make some friends, have people that are your cheerleaders. Gemma in the group here is one of my biggest cheerleaders, and let those cheerleaders also be outside of the city that you want to operate in, so that you can they can advocate for you in other spaces as well. And I think that's really important. And I've probably, this year I've lost a lot of friends through Black Lives Matter, and we've lost a lot of support in some degree, but we've also gained a lot of support. But I think that partnership working and advocacy, and real genuine advocacy, is really important. And also understanding the arts world and reading boring reports. So like reading Arts Council speak, reading other people's applications if they'll happily share that with you, reading the creative case for diversity, reading the culture strategy and all of that. And then if you don't know what that is, or if you're unpacking it, write that down. And then when you have a meeting with somebody, you can go, would you mind telling me about that? And then that becomes a potential starting point for conversation. But knowledge, I am a strong believer that knowledge is power, and it is out there. But don't feel that you have to rely on the big organizations or the organizations with money for there to be success, because once upon a time art didn't have a huge amount of money. And I think that also I've done some work in Canada and America, and they don't have that much money in the arts. Like, we're really lucky. We're so lucky in the UK. I don't think we realize, again, that privilege that we have here. So I did the first 6 months of Beyond Face with no money, and then allowed it to progress. I have no idea how long I've been speaking for, so I'm going to choose to stop now. And if you have any questions, I'm just literally talking to myself. It's really weird. It's
lovely and great, brilliant timing. So, well, thank you, Alix. Thank you very much. There's some really lovely things coming through on the chat. Jem, your cheerleader, has put a really beautiful sentence down. I'm going to read it out loud so it's heard, which is, it sounds like an incredibly important and needed company. So amazing to know that we have such an innovation that has come from the Southwest. Thank goodness you persevered, Alix. Indeed. And then there's a lot of comments about Jelly Theatre. We might have caught up on something there. And thank you very much. Whilst you were talking, Alix, I just dropped in the links to the theatre companies that you mentioned in your journey. By all means, add in other ones. And I dropped in your own website too, Beyond Face. So that's there for people to look at.
I guess I'd just finally say, if you're wanting to lead the company, I've been fortunate enough to have lots of leadership training. So I think looking out for different types of leadership training is really important, and helped me a lot. But it's actually very easy to get hung up on the leadership side of it and not the art. And I'm having to work really hard at the moment to reposition my thinking and my focus on making art rather than being in lots of spaces and leading and being like, come on, people. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Alix. And if you have questions for Alix, or any more thoughts that has come up out of that introduction to Beyond Face and Alix's work, drop them into the chat or the Q&A. We're going to move on now to talk to Trifle Gathering, talk to Kyla about Trifle Gathering. So Kyla, if you can switch your video on, hopefully we can see your tinsel-clad background and yourself.
Hello, how are we doing?
Great. And Kyla, shout when you want the slides and things to come up. And Jamie,
oh yeah, I mean, I haven't really thought it through, so we'll just ride this together and just hope it works in some way. Thanks, Susie. God, this is weird to me. I'm just talking to myself. That's bizarre. Anyway, moving forward. My name's Kyla Goodey, and like I said before, and I run Trifle Gathering Productions. We are an all-female company based in Cornwall. What do? We wear many hats. We do comedy, touring theatre, we do cabaret, we do site-specific immersive events, pop-up shows, community events, and more recently, in the last couple of years, we've been doing training in child sex exploitation, and this year we're doing training in child sex abuse with County Council and the NHS. Apart from that last hat, we generally work in comedy. And we thrive in the live. We love live events. Our work is very playful and we hope entertaining and quite absurd. We like to explore human behaviour through compelling stories, identifiable stories. And the three of us run that in Cornwall, and we also have our own careers going on alongside it. So the company isn't full-time, we work project to project basis. Let me talk a bit about why. It's funny that I've been asked to do this tonight because I started off at the Barbican Theatre. I had my first professional show at the Barbican Theatre. Mark Leville directed a dance show with a company called DNA. And I wanted to be a dancer, and I decided I wouldn't do that. I won't go through my career for too long, but it's really weird for me to then be here now and discussing why and how I do what I do, because in all honesty, I haven't really spent much time thinking about it. It's really just getting on a treadmill and going for it and making the art and making the work. I grew up in festival world, so I watched really amazing companies like Knee High and WildWorks and Footspan and Trestle and Les Barb and lots of mime and visual theatre. And then when I went to London to study mime and physical theatre with Desmond Jones, I entered a cabaret scene, quite a wild cabaret scene in Hackney. And I think that's really where the company was born. And it was really just, we were hosting a lot of these cabarets in this little small dank art centre in Chats Palace, it was called. And there was some really experimental theatre going on, really brave, really bold, very out there. And I think Trifle was just born out of the need to go, could we make something that would get a response? And in our world, it was about comedy and laughter, and we wrote a show. And we taught that show and it did really well and blah, 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 blah. And then we split, me and my partner then that run the company. And I went and did my career and joined Knee High and various other companies. Then I picked it up again when I came back to Cornwall, as everybody else. I came back to Cornwall after spending a long time away. And me and a friend, Sally Crooks, set up Trifle again. And I don't think we knew why we were doing it. That will come in reflection in a moment. I'll tell you about that. But we went to our local cafe, alternative cafe, Peapods down the road, and we set up a cabaret night. And it meant that we could play, make work, give platforms for new artists to get involved. And then that led to making new projects, going to Edinburgh Festival, immersive projects, lots of experiential projects. They had a wedding festival down there and they had this big, beautiful wedding tent. And they said, do you want it for a project? Because it's going to be up for a couple of weeks. So we put on a fake wedding. Everybody arrived thinking this wedding, beautiful wedding was going to occur. And basically it was mayhem and it all fell apart. And so we really got into the immersive side of stuff. And that maybe at this point, I could just show some of my pictures, actually. I got some pictures together. They're probably in a really bad order. But I just wanted you to show you some of the images of some of the projects that we've done. We've been going since 2006. Okay, so this is our latest project, Endless, featuring Endless. This is a project about a band who come together. It's very much inspired by the Bros documentary. Yep, and moving on, just swung through. This is a community project. They say this is our annual lip syncing event that happens right in our town. It's massive. It's a really big, this happened way before it sort of got big on TV, and everybody crams in the back of the pub and becomes their favourite stars and performs their lip syncing challenge. This is a street theatre show we did for young people, and me and Sally played digger drivers. Yeah, that was a show, and we had remote control diggers, and that was pretty out there. Yeah, that was a lot. That was probably the funnest tour I've ever done. Moving on. Our first show was Charity Shop Cabaret. We did a cabaret about a charity shop, and then we wrote a show and we took it to Edinburgh. And good that you're loving the images. This is again Endless. This is the band. It was a fake band that was sort of a sort of dance music band set in the 90s. That's us as digger drivers, showing our chests. Yeah. This is Ogden Sisters. This is an evening in trance and rap. This was all about the Foxes Sisters and the spiritualist movement. That was an immersive show again. Everybody got blindfolded and went on a journey to the astral plane. That was a bit out there and fun. A tattoo, we do a tattoo parlor in the back of a caravan. You get a fake tattoo. This is a story collecting project where you come in and you all talk about tattoos and everybody gets tattooed. A fake tattoo. That was just some costumes we found that we really liked, and we got a quick photo done. But that's a future project. I reckon I'm seeing a future project in that. Don't know what it'll be. Endless again, and that's about it. I think. Office Christmas parties, Ogden Sisters. Yeah, just flicking through them. I just wanted you. Oh, this is our street theatre act. We were some gymnastics. Gym crew that did some really bad gymnastics. That actually made us quite a bit of money, weirdly. Anyway, so end of that, I just wanted to give you a flavour and a look of what the feel of it was. Now into, and so I'm leading on to, I did it, we just went into it. It was a financial thing. I started off working with Knee High touring, and then I got a job at Gingster's Pasty Factory. And then later on in my life, I always wanted to run from getting an average job. So I have been working hard at always running from getting the job back at the pasty factory. I always felt like that's been biting on my heels. So we did set up the company. But now in reflection, and now very much the core of our company, I've played a lot of barmaids and bow maidens, young girls, queens, mothers, lovers. I played a lot of women supporting men. And it's not until I got older that I've reflected on that. And that's got to be at the heart of why we set up a company, that there hasn't been a lot of strong comedy roles written for women and given to women throughout my career. So that is definitely now the heart of it. I worked at Gingster too. Brilliant. Wow. We need to have a separate Zoom on that one. Hey, listen, and no disrespect, because I love the Gingsters posse. It was quite a monumental time for me. So yes, so that's really at the heart of our work now. And let's go into how we did it. How did we do it? We just did it. There was no business strategies behind any of it. There was no plan. And in a way, reflection, I think it is great to have a plan. I think we have been slow at establishing ourselves and at finding our feet, and it's taken quite a long while to get where we've got. So I think, like Alix said before, I think knowing unique selling point. Looking at work that you love and why you do the work is actually really important. And we learned that we'd probably been running for a good 8-10 years before we even considered any of that stuff. We were just running the work. So I think making a mission statement or a manifesto really helps to ground what you're doing. And I think that is really important. I'm not very, my grammar in English isn't very strong, part of my makeup. So writing funding bids for both of us was really hard work, and there's been a massive learning curve. And I can happily say I finally don't mind a funding bid, but they are a struggle, and running a company is really hard work, but possibly some of the most rewarding work I've ever done in my career. And I've worked with some big companies and they are amazing shows, but there's nothing like coming back and putting your little gift into the scene. So it's been a funny old time, and actually having this moment to think about it. But I do think you need to build strong relationships and advocates for you. Get advice, as much advice as you can. I think in reflection again, we really just put our heads down and went for stuff. And I think we could have benefited a lot more by opening up and talking to people more. But we have had an amazing eclectic mix, and I love all the projects that we've done. And all you can ever do is make the work that you want to make. And I'm really looking forward to making more female-led, strong, brilliant comedy. I don't know if I've got time, but I just wanted to share our latest project, which is a project we made with Knee High in lockdown. And this is for the learning disability community. And this is called Homes Grown, A Living Room Knees Up. I'll just show you the show real quickly to get a little feel for it.
Hello, everybody. Hey, nice to see you. Hello, neighbours.
I wanted to share that only because it's not a very good example of our work, because we usually do touring theatre or immersive projects. But right now, I just wanted to share what we're currently doing. We're really passionate about it. In 2008, we did some balls for the learning disability communities in Cornwall, and we've always wanted to revisit those balls. We set up 2 spaces where everybody would come in fancy dress and posh cars, and they had a night which was solely for them to have an amazing time. They hijacked the evening. They took the microphone off the cabaret. They hit the dance floor. They danced for each other. They sang for each other. And it was such an amazing experience for us that we've always wanted to revisit making something for this community. We've been trying to do that during lockdown. And yeah, it's been really difficult community to reach, but that's what we're running at the moment. So I'll end with that. So I'm really sorry I've jipped about quite a lot in terms of it all, but I hope there's a nice little varied mix of stuff. I've used my hands a lot in really good ways there. See that?
Thank you, Kyla. I like the fact that you darted around in all sorts of different directions. Why not, eh?
It's classic me, sorry. It's ginger, it's been ginger.
Yeah. It's the tinsel fueled sort of
yeah
going on behind you. Thank you. Lots of lovely comments again about how brilliant how much they loved your photographs, shared love of working at Ginsters, and super interesting. There's a question that's come from Julius, and we will going back to that at the end of the session, and we'll open it up to everyone because I think it's a really useful question, which is sort of where does Kyla's finances come from? Probably not just her Ginster's career, but it might be interesting to look at sort of what people's current projects are and where those finances has come from as an example, maybe. So you can have a little think for that. Thank you, Kyla, very much. I sort of want to go along to one of your balls, actually. They sound really good. We're going to move on now and listen to John and Sam talk about Downstage Right. I'm going to welcome them back into the room. Here they are. Here's Sam. Here's John.
Hello.
Fantastic. I'm going to leave you to it, lads.
Thanks, Susie. Yeah, I guess one of the first things about working in a partnership is make sure you know who's going to speak first, right, John? Let's talk a little bit about Downstage Right. So for those of you who don't know, Downstage Right, we're a fairly new theatre company. I think we started sort of spring 2018 time, and essentially our aim is to create development opportunities and production opportunities for writers, specifically playwrights based in Devon and Cornwall. We do that or we try and do that in a range of ways, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But I guess we started very much because John and I are playwrights ourselves, first and foremost. That's how we met. I think we met sort of facilitating at Theatre Royal, started speaking about writing, and we started having conversations about sort of the new writing infrastructure in the area, and specifically things that we as writers needed, which we felt we wanted more of, or we felt we weren't being offered at the time. So the company grew out of that, really, essentially trying to offer writers the things that we wanted ourselves as writers.
Yeah, and hopefully in an altruistic way, as well as wanting opportunities for ourselves. And I think this, although in a very different context, is sort of similar to what other people have talked about sort of noticing a gap or noticing an opportunity or a space. It's a conversation I've had a few times with different people where we've sort of gone, oh, this thing should be happening. Why is nobody doing it? And then going, oh, that means we should probably do that. And I think if you have a real sense of what that gap is that you want to fill and can fill, there's a thing about, which I think is coming across with all of the people that have spoken so far, and will, I'm sure, with Sue as well, is going that we have permission to do that, and that was okay. Because I remember someone very early on when I was finishing my degree going, when you sort of start to build a career, absolutely you can apply for jobs and look for opportunities elsewhere or from companies that also exist, that there are a limited number of those things, and that you sort of have to do that in tandem with building your own opportunities and sort of learning through your own things. So yeah, so when we saw that there weren't the short play nights that there were in other parts of the country and in other cities that we'd lived in and worked in, when there weren't as many writers' groups or workshops by established playwrights that were accessible down in Devon and Cornwall, we started to have a conversation about how we might shift that and how we might change that. Yeah,
and I think something we were keen to do from the get-go is we're aware that sort of within Devon and Cornwall there's going to be a range of writers when it comes to experience. So I guess one of our first early considerations was essentially providing a program of offers which catered to all of those different experiences. So everything from introducing people who've never seen a bit of new writing before to new writing, to giving writers who are sort of on the cusp of working professionally a platform to see their work staged in front of a hopefully friendly audience, and everything that comes in between. So I guess first and foremost we started with our short play nights. Our short play nights, essentially we do open call outs, and we ask writers to submit. We provide feedback on all submissions, and then we, in collaboration with the directors we're working in and other artists, eventually end up with 4 which we give sort of professional standard productions to, that allows the writers to see their work up on its feet. The reason this is sort of at the forefront of what we do is because as writers, for me and John, I think our biggest learning curves, learning experiences has been seeing our work live and seeing people respond to it live. And that can be really good learning experience, or sometimes it can be a pretty horrible one. So I think ensuring that we sort of fostered a fun, sort of friendly evening with regards to the audience and the way the work's staged, to make sure that's as safe as possible for writers. Outside of that, we sort of provide a number of other things as well, whether it be workshops run by John and I, masterclasses, which we sort of invite writers from all around the UK to come down in person or on Zoom and run workshops for writers here. We do residency, which sort of offers writers the time to go away and write for free, and we provide sort of quite concrete script, dramaturgy, and feedback. So there's a whole range of stuff that we offer.
And I think in terms of knowing that supporting writers is what we wanted to do, part of how we've worked has been coming up with a list of all the possible ways that might happen, all the possible things that that could happen, or different sort of models, and effectively sort of test driving them. And I think that was a really important element of what we did early on, was going, okay, we sort of think that this would be useful, and we sort of think that this is a good way to approach it. And we sort of almost did a number of pilots of that, and that I think was really useful. So the first short play night we did was actually performing plays by established writers from Theatre Uncut, which is a really brilliant theatre company who commission writers to write politically engaged plays each year. And those are often on a particular theme. And so when Sam and I went, well, we sort of want to support writers. One of the key things we want to do first is work at sort of producing short plays. That was partly because that felt realistic in terms of scale and what was achievable with the resources that we had at the time. But also that meant that we wouldn't just be creating the opportunity for one person, that there would be 4 writers or 5 writers that would get something produced. We could potentially give work to 4 or 5 directors. There would be, a number of actors, and that would help us provide opportunities, but help us also sort of start to build relationships. So we did that first show on a absolute shoestring with very little money. Theatre Royal very kindly, Plymouth, particularly David Prescott, really sort of supported us doing that as an event, and we just tried it out. And it was also useful for Sam and I to go, can we work together? Because we've been colleagues running workshops. I hope I'm not overstepping the bounds, have become friends by that point, but we hadn't worked together in that way. And I think that really helped us solidify our vision for how we wanted the company to work, and to see that our skill set met, and that our sort of values and things that we're interested in met. And I think that there's a thing that I'm sure other companies will maybe have a similar experience of sort of finding your tribe of like-minded people, and people whose work and experience you respect, and that you have some kind of synchronicity with, you have some kind of match up with. And we sort of initially just kept sort of trying some different offers and seeing what happened, and seeing what the response was from writers particularly. So that led to a few more short play nights. But one of the, just in terms of how our model operates now, that I think was sort of born in that first experience, was that we're really keen that we genuinely would try and engage a wider audience and build an audience for new plays, because there would be no point in us producing lots and lots of new short plays if nobody wanted to come and see them, or if only a very small sort of set of people that were already into that wanted to come. And so those original Theatre Uncut plays were all about women and power. And so that meant, in practical terms, it meant that Sam and I didn't direct any of those shows because we are not women. So all the playwrights were female. We had an all-female directing team, and we just sort of produced and tried to enable that happening. But we wanted to tie in with some kind of local group. And so we paired up with, there's an arts collective called Feminist Fusion, who do feminist talks and arts events in the city. And so we invited them to work with us and to think about how we might sort of run that event together. And that meant that we then had poets and musicians from that art collective come and perform as well. And I think that sense of tying, working in partnership has been a huge part of how we've then built the company. So our the sort of biggest short play night that we did at that point with Arts Council funding was was designed to 100th, I will say this wrong, the 100th anniversary of Nancy Astor becoming the first female MP to take her seat. And that was, we sort of wanted to find a theme for those short play nights to sort of make it a cohesive evening and not a series of sort of unconnected plays. But also we wanted to find a way to really tie that into to communities in Devon. Nancy Astor is a problematic figure in many ways, so we were keen that it also wasn't just going to be an event that would sort of praise or glorify her. So we really wanted to talk to lots of groups, and that meant that we partnered with schools to talk to them about what that anniversary meant about politics and about the role of and representation of women in society. We worked with the Youth Parliament group to talk about that, and I think that idea of finding a way to step outside the normal theatre bubble and to find partnerships that help you build audience and help sort of challenge writers has been key to everything we've done. So the most recent short play night was in partnership with the Charles Causley Trust and took place in Cornwall, sort of celebrating and responding to the work of a Cornish poet and therefore sort of reaching against something different.
Yeah, and with regards to making all this happen, I guess John and I have sort of been lucky at points. We've sort of been successful with Arts Council at points, but there's also been points where we haven't been, and we've had, as the others have spoken about, where we've been doing stuff for no money. So what's really, I think what we found really crucial is establishing the parts of our model which are self-sustaining and sort of generate a bit of money which we can then take and put into an opportunity which otherwise we wouldn't be able to run. So looking for those other sources of income, particularly the sort of self-generated ones with us, that'll be the masterclasses and the workshops, to then bankroll the other stuff that you want to do, and you wouldn't be able to do it without the money. Something I wanted to pick up on as well, John, I think you were talking about the idea of sort of like things that we come up with being able to be expanded and nudged, and not the first iteration not necessarily being the last version of it. So one of the things we've had a lot of fun with and has proved to be one of the more popular things we do is a scheme called Playwrights for Hire. So when we talk about trying to engage new audiences for new writing, this is one of our sort of primary ways of doing that. Came from an idea of John's originally, sort of the idea of us parking up somewhere in the city with a bunch of playwrights, members of the public being able to come over and commission those playwrights to write a one-page play for £1. Originally, we did that in Rumpus Cozy as part of Plymouth Art Weekender, and it was sort of a sort of confined thing in which we did the commissioning of the plays. People got a piece and they went away. But I guess in sort of being relaxed with these ideas and that we're coming up with, that has eventually grown into something a bit bigger. So what Playwrights for Hire now looks like is we've been doing it in partnership with Plymouth and Exeter Fringe most recently. We sort of station playwrights around the place for a week, and that culminates in a live show at the end of the week, in which audience members can come along and see us try and stage as many one-page plays as we can in an hour. So that's been really important for us with regards to getting people in to look at our work. And what we're really trying to do is then provide, I guess, pathways for them to move from playwrights to hire to maybe see one of our short play nights or engage with one of our workshops. I guess that mobility between opportunities is really key to what we do.
Yeah, and I think that's, yeah, as a model means that we've sort of tried and tested and sort of slowly built up from the resources that we have, which I think is really, you know, if you're thinking about starting a company, is about, you know, so almost doing like a little life inventory of what resources you have, what contacts do you have, where can you begin, and starting an idea and letting that then build. And I'm guessing that the miraculous appearance and disappearance of Susie means I need to stop talking in a second. So I'll just round this off, hopefully, into this one sentence. But what that has meant is that by doing those different projects and building those different partnerships, we were then, in the middle of this year, able to build a proposal for a year of delivery of our work with writers. And people that we'd had conversations with or had seen our work previously, or people who we'd done smaller projects with, we were able to ask them to be part of a bigger Arts Council project. And so, okay, so he's logging back in, great. And so what that meant is we then had sort of tried and road tested things at small scale to then be able to say to the Arts Council, okay, we're going to run this project for a year that's going to do this support for writers, have these workshops, do this in partnership with this theatre or with this organisation. And that sort of was the culmination of all these little sort of smaller test projects and conversations and collaborations that has now sort of paid off, so that next year we'll be running Write Up, which will provide workshops and rehearsed readings of plays and staged readings and all kinds of exciting things. So if you're a playwright in Devon and or Cornwall, do get in touch with us. But also if you're a director or actor, or you want to sort of get involved with that work this way, we're genuinely interested in expanding the pool of people that we work with, and that enabling us to do more. I think that's been 10 minutes now, Sam, don't you?
Yeah, I agree, mate.
So I think we will wind down. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John and Sam. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't on purpose appear in your screen. I had to log back in and my video was on when I logged in, so you saw me panic. But thank you very much. So we have one more very patient panelist left to talk to, which is Sue from WildWorks. These are all so interesting. I think it's really great that we've had so many come and join us this evening. I'm going to pass over to Sue so she can talk about the birth of WildWorks and tell us the wonderful story. Hopefully she's here somewhere.
You need to let me start my video. You've asked me. I can now. That's it. You stopped me. We're here. Hello.
Hello, here you are.
Hello. Thank you. Great. Yeah, I'm going to do a bit of time travel. I'm going to try and do 30 years in 10 minutes, because I'm going to start with Knee High, because obviously WildWorks grew out of the work we did with Knee High. So I'm going to show you a ton of pictures, but really quickly, I hope. Okay, here we go. So when I joined Knee High back in 1988, in the last century. At that stage, it absolutely was. It was, in the best sense, we were a group of amateurs. It was a sheep farmer and a teacher and a rock and roll roadie and a Scottish folk musician, and a couple of lovely young people from Dartington, and a boy who'd just done a bit of National Youth Theatre, and me. And eventually Bill, and we did at that stage. It was such a release, really, because I've been doing a lot of very serious work in London, very grown up work, and I ended up in a field with Mike Shepherd and Charlie Barnicut, and Alan Drake, shifting the sheep and cow poo before we could rehearse, and it was just felt like a total liberation. But the point was that we didn't. I mean, there were no theatres in Cornwall then. literally no theatres apart from the Minack. There was the City Hall, but that was like a big village hall basically in Truro, and we worked in village halls and schools. And it occurred to us that actually there was this great, wonderful, wild, wonderful landscape outside we could work in. So we started to, oh, it's not letting me do that. How annoying. Well, there we are. We started to make work outside. And quite quickly we found that the things we did inside didn't work. The sets fall over and our voices didn't carry and words behaved in a different way. But actually there were new toys to play with. And we found that the joy of working in weather, whatever the weather was, and the audience sharing that weather with you was so exciting. We didn't tour lighting to start with. We lit the shows with firelight, and to be able to use fire was a wonderful treat. And then just to be aware of the fact that all our stories took place they started in daylight and went into darkness, and that felt like really strong poetry for us. So a lot of our shows were quite melancholy. Inevitably, we started to work in the landscape, and we started with just a little gang of us, 5 of us, and you realize quite quickly that you couldn't animate a whole landscape with just 5 of you. So we started to work with other people, and this is a group of British Trust for Conservation volunteers in Kennel Vale, and they came to help us trim the shrubs and make the path safe for the audience, because he'd started taking audiences on journeys rather than having them be static. And they quite quickly got involved and became the most amazing colleagues. And from our point of view, it was quite an expedient thing to say we need some more people to help us tell these stories. And actually then what happened was their stories became our stories. So people like this brought their passions to our work, and we learned from them about their about the importance of the environment and nature, and their passion for it then changed our stories. So it made us think about how to make our work more porous and more accepting of other people, letting other people in, and being less controlling of it, I suppose. This is another example of that. This is the famous Emma Rice in the middle of here, who was with Knee High for a long time and then went on to run the Globe and now runs Wise Children. But this is a piece of work we did in the China Clay Quarry near St Austell. And this is a classic example of, when you're working in the open air in the landscape, you can't control it. You haven't got a door you can close on your rehearsal room. And these guys, this is a Bodmin chapter of Hell's Angels, were scorching through our rehearsals every day and being very annoying. But actually they became these wonderful colleagues. Bill approached them and said, we need some armies for this show. We were doing Nick Dark's piece, Hell's Mouth, about based on the story of Antigone, Sophocles' Antigone. And we needed warring armies. And Bill said, do you want to be in our play? And they said, well, we can't act. And he said, you don't have to act. You have to do what you do already, which is ride your bikes brilliantly. And they did. And they were the most extraordinary partners in this project. And they were disciplined and wonderful. They helped us with another problem, which is because it was a big open clay pit, it was taking 5 minutes for an actor to make an entrance. So the actors came in on the back of these bikes. And it was a very exciting thing for the audience and for us to work with them. And this is in a little village called Stanmer near Brighton. And again, we started to build this connection with the people of the place into our work. And it became a defining feature of the work. This is now WildWorks, not Knee High. And we worked with everybody in this village. This is a dying village. It's owned by Brighton City Council, and as a tenant leaves or dies, they don't let the house again. So that we think that Brighton have probably got real estate plans for the village, but it tied in the theme of the show we did here was about grief. It was the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. And so we worked with every single person in that village, and we made the underworld in the village. And this is John Gapper, and with him we turfed his Land Rover, and he filled it with, he was obsessed with wildflowers. And we find when we're doing this work, when you're trying to work with a community, we're heat seeking. you try and find where the energy and the passion of the people who are living there, what are their enthusiasms and their passions and their anxieties, and you mirror them and you give them a voice. So there are lots of gifts with working outside. Things are different in so many ways. Audiences behave in a different way. An audience going to a theatre kind of knows pretty much what's going to happen. They're going to go and sit in the dark, and they're going to watch a piece of work, and they're going to participate by laughing or clapping or whatever is required of them. After about 45 minutes or an hour, they'll stop and maybe go and have a gin and tonic, and then they'll go back and do another stint. So they're kind of safe. Whereas when you take an audience into the outside landscape, they don't know what's going to happen to them. It makes them discombobulated. I love that word. And it's a good thing for an audience to be discombobulated. It makes them slightly anxious. It makes them more alert. They rely on their senses more. They smell the sea. They smell the seaweed. They can feel the weather, and they become more sociable. They talk to each other, and we love that in them. We love the fact that they become willingly part of your world. This particular project was ghost nets on the north coast of Cornwall. And this is a tipping point for us. There was a point in this show where the team, the performers, they ran into the sea to pull the fishing nets out. And one night the tide was a lot further out than usual, and we found that the audience were running with us. And they got to the sea, and some of the audience came into the sea with us. And it was just such an interesting moment that these people, we'd somehow accidentally taken down the boundaries between performer and audience, and that became a conscious thing we wanted to do, is to find ways in which we took down those boundaries. So now there are different ways in which that happens, and this is again in Souterrain, when the audience are making their way into the underworld. They come to understand that they're going to the river of Lethe, where all your memories will be washed from you. But before you go to Lethe, you go to the archive of the human heart, and you're invited to write a memory onto a luggage label. And the labels invite you to, they say, what does your heart want to remember? What do your eyes want to remember? What do your hands want to remember? Or what does your heart want to forget? Your eyes forget, your hands forget. And we didn't know what people would write. But they did write everything. I mean, Mercedes coined the term, the archive of the human heart, because they disclose everything. And then the most beautiful things to read. This is a memory that we collected in Dolcoath. So what do your hands want to forget? Having the keys to the blacksmith shop taken from them when the mine shut and the only job I've loved was taken away. And of course, we don't always work out of doors. Sometimes we're working in kind of post-industrial settings, or we've even worked in palaces and castles. But taking audiences into nature has become a really powerful thing for us. And for, I think, especially in this last period of lockdown, it's been, there's few things to be grateful for in this last year, but that is one of them, that people have rediscovered their need for nature and their need for each other. And certainly to be able to take audiences on this journey is very powerful. Just a sensory thing here. When we did the recce for this site, this is Dolcoath, the mine waste at Dolcoath. We recce'd it in the winter, and we hadn't noticed that it was full of buddleia. So when the audience made their way down into the underworld, down to try and find Eurydice, there was this narcotic smell of perfume of these butterfly trees. It became the smell of the underworld. And those are the kind of accidents, the gifts that you are given by working outside. It might be a murmuration of starlings. It might be the 8:10 train going across the embankment with all the passengers looking out like souls on their way to the underworld. It might be dolphins popping their heads up at the Minack. But these are all, we treat them as gifts rather than as distractions or challenges. You get to play with big toys outside. We love a crane. We love to fly people. And we work with boats and cranes and scissor lifts. I am a qualified scissor lift driver, I'll have you know. The other delight is working with experts. It's a license to open windows into worlds that you would not otherwise encounter. So top left is Dr. Joanna Marshner, who is the lead curator at Kensington Palace. And she was part of the commissioning team that took us into the palace for 2 years. She's a world authority on 18th century textile, but she's also a fantastic storyteller. And again, we learnt a love of objects and the meanings contained, the meanings and emotions contained in objects from her. Top right is Michalis Terlikas, who is the world authority on Cypriot erotic song. And he can improvise a love song or a lament for you. And he worked with us on The Very Old Man with Enormous Wings in Cyprus and in Cornwall. And it's one of the highlights of my life is to have an improvised love song sung to me by Michalis. Bottom left is Holger Lonza, who was an MA student at Falmouth. And his art practice is to use traditional materials for contemporary art. And he worked with us on The Beautiful Journey and taught us how to make a curragh, which is an Irish boat made out of sticks and canvas and tar. And bottom right is the amazing Sean Ellis, working with the National Youth Theatre team that we were doing some R&D with in the woods at Tahiti. And he lived with wild wolves in Idaho for 2 years and has a captive wolf pack. And he taught us wolf behaviour because we had a pack of wolves that had to bring down a deer as part of our project. And it's, again, this, I suppose, license to be curious is part of the joy of this work. We try and find community voices wherever we go, and they become such an important part of the work. We literally can't make the work without them. And I suppose one of my messages this evening is asking for help is being vulnerable and asking for help is a wonderful thing. People want to help you. This might seem like a strange image for community voices, because actually this is the one place we didn't have a vibrant community. This is Kensington Palace. And we were casting around trying to find this community. Was it going to be, you know, Ukrainian oligarchs? It didn't seem very promising around Kensington, but actually we found our community, which was the warders and the conservators in the palace. And we worked very closely with them, and their stories and their view of the world was part of the show. And this is probably the biggest community animation we've ever done, which was Port Talbot in South Wales, working with the National Theatre of Wales and with Michael Sheen. And all these images are images of different sectors of the community who we horse whispered into our world and gave us their time and their energy and their stories. Wonderful circus school up the valley in Neath, where the kids would tie paraffin-soaked rags to their bikes and hair around the streets. They became the torments for Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. We worked with the local colleges, and there were a lot of and the trade union movement, and they became the protesters who were protesting Pilate's invasion of the town. Bottom right was the two rugby teams who became Pilate's shock troops who were invading Port Talbot. And the bottom left is a lot of other people, a lot of retired people and teachers who became the local police force who were trying to keep order. This is 72 hours of performance that took place from Good Friday, morning of dawn on Good Friday into the evening of Easter Sunday. We crucified Michael Sheen on the RNLI roundabout. There he is. And as part of that whole period, again, I suppose this was the most intense piece of community animation we'd ever done. We collected hundreds of stories and thousands of stories and many hours of a home movie and photographs. And so when Michael was on the cross, he wasn't playing a preaching Jesus, he was playing a listening character. He played a teacher who'd lost his memory. So he spent the time in the lead up to the production listening to people. And on the water screen behind him, as he was crucified, are played out the home movies and the photographs that we've been given. And he's recounting the stories that he's heard. This is, I mean, when lockdown started, when the coronavirus crisis hit us, a lot of people said, oh, WildWorks, you'll be all right, you work outdoors. And of course, ironically, the project we were supposed to be doing this year, in fact, at this moment, we've been invited by Ferrers Vivian at Trello Warren to come and make a piece of work inside in Trello Warren House. So we've put that on hold. We thought we could probably make a socially distanced version of it, but it's such a brilliant idea that Myth has got that we don't want to spend it unless we can do it properly. But we did make a piece of work this year with the National Trust, who've been wonderful partners. And we made a piece of work that we would not have made if it wasn't for coronavirus. We made a piece of socially distanced work on the cliffs at the Tallock using binaural sound. So the audience arrived, they were all spaced out along the amphitheatre of the cliffs. They had headphones on and they heard this amazing soundtrack that was created with Mercedes Kemp's writing and many other voices as well. And Josh Farrow and Kieran Clark. Many artists were involved in it, but it was as people were listening to this soundtrack, then performers moved through the landscape, and it was a very beautiful meditative piece of work. We were only able to show it to about 90 people because of the situation, but we hope it's become a really interesting prototype that we'd like to do some more of. So watch this space. That's me. I whizzed through that. Ha. Hello.
Hello, Sue. Thank you very much. That was so lovely. I got a bit mesmerised. I was just listening to your voice and sort of lulled into a lovely dream for a while. It's lovely. Thank you. How's we doing for time? It's 7:25. That's been an epic, wonderful journey through 4 really interesting Southwest-based companies, as I'm sure you'll agree. We've had some questions that have come through. So what I'd like to do is invite the other panelists to come back, put their videos on, if that's possible. And I'm going to ask some directed questions to a couple of you to answer rather than everybody, so that we can make the most of the small amount of time we have left. The first question is from Julius, who asked about finances. And I wonder if first Kyla and then John or Sam might be able to talk about sort of where your finances have come from, perhaps this year as an example for sort of a current project, just to give Julius an idea.
For Trifle, actually, we put 3 bids in as we were going into lockdown, and we didn't get any of them. Partly because the work wasn't going to be able to be made, even though we tried to shimmy a few of them. And dusting off from spending hours on a funding bid is a really tricky thing to do. So for me, at that point, we were like, well, maybe we'll just have time out. You know, people were having time out to recoup and reset. But I'd always had this ticking panic that I needed work this winter. So luckily, I went to Knee High and they offered me to pay for the pilot of Homes Grown. And then I went in for another arts bid with their support. I went in for an under 15 ACE bid, and we managed to get that bid. So it was quite a it's been quite a full-on year in terms of trying to get money. It's been a real like, oh yeah, we're going to get this, we're going to get this. No, we haven't got this. Pulling ourselves back up again to go back into a bid. Those bids are really hard. We were lucky enough to have support from Charlotte Bond, who worked for Knee High, and I absolutely advise that you try and get somebody to help you with your bid who really knows. You can really just throw bids in and lose hours to that stuff, but if you've got somebody that can go through it with you, or you can write it and feed through it through their knowledgeable brain, a producer, it will really save a lot of time. But it is part and parcel of it. A lot of my friends are not getting it first time. They're either getting it second, third time. So go in with enough time to know that you can do it a couple of times at least, and give yourself the space to go dust yourself off, because you'll feel quite angry because you're getting paid no money to write these bids, unless, you know, MPO funded companies are in a great position because they've got people in offices to write those bids. But for people that haven't got that, it's a real struggle, you know, and you are having to do a lot of time on your computers for free. You've got to really want to do that project. The beauty of writing those bids, though, is you do learn about what the project is by the end of it. I mean, you flipping know your project by the end of writing those bids 3 times. So we were lucky to get to park all of our other projects, pull this one out, and with support from Knee High, we managed to do it, and we managed to get another commission. But also, just quickly while I'm here on that, because we're in the middle of doing both that project and another project, and we're already working way more than we've asked for. So, and I remember another producer talking to me and saying, you know, when you work your budget out, and then find another contingent to put on top of that. Don't ever, like, always find extra money. There will always be so many extra costs you will not find, and there will be so many hours not covered. And we're already having to DJ 2 bids around each other to try and make up for the bits that aren't working. So get support from a producer. If you can find a big writer, there are a few around. Become really good friends with them, like take them out for dinner or have them around for Christmas Day. Really look after them, have them as a good mate. But ultimately, it's a really bumpy road. But when you get the money, it feels great, and it feels really good to have put that work in and make the work. So it's all part of the journey. But yeah.
Thank you. So Arts Council, if some of you younger ReBels Masterclass attendees tonight aren't sure, that essentially means that you apply for money for a project. So you won't necessarily get money for a whole year like a job, but you're getting money for a sort of a project itself. John or Sam, do you want to add anything to that question about how you've been financed for project or for Downstage Right in the last 12 months?
I've not got a huge amount to add, to be honest. I think it's really worth us saying that for like the stuff we were doing in COVID times, which we're still in, but I guess lockdown 1 being more specific, we were me and John are very lucky. Like, we had other jobs in the arts. The stuff we were doing for Downstage Right, we as Kyla sort of said, we tried and failed to get money for. So sometimes that does happen. At the moment, it's very much our workshops and masterclasses. I guess our model is sort of we hope and usually do sort of sell enough tickets to pay the artist, and then make a little bit more for the company on top of that, which we then take forward to other things. But yeah, otherwise, that's it.
And I just think quickly that thing about resilience and Arts Council bids is really important. You know, the amount that we just have to fund a year's activity was the second time it went in that we got it. And, you know, sometimes you've just got to persevere with it. And that thing about really loving the project and be really clear about what that project is, how it's going to work, and who else you're going to work with, really helps. But there's a point at which the Arts Council is a little bit like the weather, right? You can't really get angry with you do feel angry, but sometimes it's just not your round, or it's just not the right moment for it. And so if the project is worth doing, then that thing of resubmitting and going through the process again is important.
And also on that, if you can find some smaller bodies of work, funding bids, like in Cornwall, we have Feast. I don't know what you have in Plymouth, but there's Heritage Lottery and there's Awards for All. Or if you can find an associate, like you might go to the Barbican Theatre and say, can you give us a couple of £100 to be part of this? Like, find people to come on board with you in your project. And also just make sure you can prove that there's a need for it. Like for the Homegrown, it was an easy project to get the money because I had like 20 signatures from the NHS saying they needed this project. So if you can prove that, those things will really make your bid look stronger.
I was just going to jump in and say, sorry, it's like I think for us as well, we've kind of had the workshops as a source of income, and obviously like we've got training as an income. But I guess I wanted to say that even when you get the money, that's still, for us, lots of people say, oh, Beyond Face, you're bound to get the funding because we tick boxes. And that's quite hard, because what it means that we have to do is feel like we're in a position of proving ourselves all the time, or justifying why we got the funding, or then having that additional pressure of quality and ensuring that everything that we do is of a particular high standard of quality. So I just want to kind of emphasize that out there, because often people will say to us just like, oh, you're bound to get it, and it's you know, and it's a difficult climate where with everybody kind of going for funding, but once you've got it, you still have to do the work, and you still have to kind of work really hard to ensure that, you know, you get the next thing, or that you're kind of trying to amplify what it is that you're striving to do. So the money doesn't, you know, it's obviously helpful, but it's still the hard work continues.
One more question that we're going to ask, and this comes from Jess. I was going to direct this to Alix and Sue in particular, which was, how do you go about finding people to work with? I know Sue touched on this a little bit in her presentation, but I just wondered if you could talk about an example of how you do invite people into the process of making something with you, or to find new people, a new team perhaps.
So it's really interesting, isn't it? We've never, it sounds, in some ways it sounds bad, but we've very rarely done an audition process. And I think I was very struck by when John said, you know, you find your tribe. And that could sound very exclusive. It's actually put a lot of the effort in WildWorks has been making ourselves as porous as possible. So you make yourself very available to people. You make work in public. So you actually make the work in a public space. People are in and out of your world. You bring a huge level of humility to it. You're a guest in their space. You're not in charge. And you find ways in which you demonstrate how hard you work. You're hardworking, and you're entertaining and delightful and attractive. And it means that people are drawn to you. So, and it works in all kinds of ways. If you're working, we were working in a place in northern France where the location we were given, which is a derelict convent, it turned out was the hangout ground for all the local teenagers, and they were roundly pissed off by the fact that we'd arrived. But actually, we quite early in the residency there, we started to make we needed to do some big fire sculptures. So we started to set fire to things, and they got a bit closer. And then we enrolled them in helping us make some fire sculptures, and then we started to get the kit out, and we were needing security done on them, and so these kids became security on we trusted them to look after our equipment. So you find ways in which you build bridges across, you know, what feels like a divide, because you're coming into a place often as strangers from outside, and that's not always an easy thing to do. So in terms of working with communities, it is a horse whispering process, which is you're very attentive. You pay attention, and you do a lot of listening, and through that, mostly that's how we've also recruited people to work with. So we find on any project, we will have our core WildWorks team, but we'll always work with new artists. There's never a project where we're not working with new artists, often from the place where we're working. And they might have been, for instance, on some projects, we'll say to our commissioning people, okay, we need you need to supply us with artists of your choice. We're not necessarily going to say they've got to be, you know, actors or musicians or filmmakers. You tell us who you want us to work with, and they'll become part of our gang. So again, we tend not to run auditions, but people find us and we find them, and we do that by making ourselves as porous as we can.
Thank you. Alix, over to you.
I guess I go to quite a lot of talks and events that are of interest to me and the company, and you know, lots of kind of so take for example like the Black Southwest Network in Bristol have had like lots of different events, so I've kind of gone to them where there's been like panel discussions, and I've just like sat in and listened and met people that have been there through that, as to offer a different way of thinking about meeting people. Twitter, I'm not a fan in some ways, but also think it's brilliant in other ways, just stalking people, just reading that this is going off online, but you know, looking at people and going, I really like you, or I like your work, and just starting to kind of, for theatre, John, yes, not for and just trying to kind of get to know people's work, as I said earlier, like looking at other theatre companies that are doing the work that you really like and connect with, and just kind of just connecting up with other people, I think, yeah, just being visible is really important, and like being an audience member and just kind of being there and, you know, almost eavesdropping in conversations and, you know, being in the bar or area or whatever afterwards, and just getting that opportunity to and I think, you know, when theatres program other companies that you know about or that you like, you know, when we get or when like Eclipse and other people get programmed, like people will approach us and go, can you help get an audience? And then you end up kind of meeting the actors as well, on various things. But recruitment is hard, but I think it's also about making friends with people. And for me, like whoever works with us in the company has got to have a sense of humour. So, you know, and has got to like music. So if there's any way of possible of just getting that vibe off of people, yeah, and just think sometimes like don't be afraid to ask. Like be really clear with your ask of what you're looking for. If you don't ask, you don't get. And if they aren't interested, then go stalk some more people. And yeah.
Thank you very much. Gosh, I want to carry on talking to you all evening, but we are 10 minutes over, so I feel like that's probably the end of the questions for today. We have got through all the ones that were put forward by the participants, so I feel okay with that. I have got 10 billion for myself. I want to ask you, but thank you so much for coming along. It feels like there's been sort of lots of key common ground around being visible, and all of you being quite generous as a sort of as a company, and focused on actually facilitating opportunities for other people, almost as your starting points for why you set the companies up, more than as a potential sort of showcase for yourselves, which is quite a feat and quite wonderful to hear about. So thank you. It's been really interesting to talk to you, and I think that this one will get lots and lots of watches back as well for people wanting to find out more about you. Yeah, thanks for everyone for coming along. I'm going to close the session now for the attendees. Panelists, if you want to hang on for a moment, we'll just wait for everyone to leave, and then we can say our goodbyes. But thank you very much, everybody. This one will be up on Beehive probably next week sometime on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it again or recommend it to friends. Thank you.